Hodgie, I think you want to line me up. So go your hardest.
You got cracked ribs.
Go your hardest, young man.
Go your hardest, Kane. I don't have to. You sit back and I tuned in to watch one of the most respected players Port Adelaide have ever had play his 350th game on the weekend.
Yes.
Here we go.
And then I thought I'll go through Instagram because that's what everyone does. When they post, they want to celebrate someone's career and they say, like, well done, mate. But then I'd go to Kane Cornes. 650 between us. Kane, who gives us stuff how many games you played?
It was a
You have
private
retired.
joke,
He
Hodgie.
played 300. I
Yes.
don't. And then I thought, let's look at the photos because normally you'll have maybe one of you guys together. 100%. I totally understand that.
Yep.
No, one with you and Boki, another one you presenting. Of course, you would have put your hand up to present him a bowl of wine instead of all the other past players. Then the next one of you cuddling him.
Yeah.
Then another one with all the boys.
That's it.
I was waiting for you to put one up of you in your playing days and you holding up a premiership cup. Is there
Fair
any
enough.
more self-fulfilling, Kane?
Fair. On reflection, it was a bit me. But there was a bit of a private joke associated with it. I don't think many people got. But let's be serious, and I'll cop that, Hodgie. I think it's a fair crack at me, and on reflection, I should have made it more about Boki. But it was a pretty good performance in the second half because I'm going, this team's not switched on. They are not ready to play 11 points down at half time, I think, and would have been a disaster for Boki if they lost.
To be honest,
So I
Kane,
was glad.
once I saw your post, I stopped watching. I had enough of Port Adelaide after watching your post.
Had enough. All right, let's move on to the serious stuff. Tommy Stewart, what could Adelaide have done better? Because I thought it was maybe Matthew Nix's worst performance as coach. Has that been harsh?
Look, there's certain things that he would have went back and watched the game and reflect on. I thought maybe would have done a few things different. Starting with Pedler on him. Look, we're happy to try and shut down Tommy Stewart in any way you think. Pedler, a nice left foot kick, might be able to snag a couple goals, but you could tell that it looked like he'd never played that role before. And when you're playing against a bloke who's earned 5 All-Australian jumpers already, he knows that position. So to put him on there at quarter time, Pedler had 0 touches. Tommy had 3 intercept marks and also 7 himself. But then after that, they decided that, Pedler's not the right man for the job. Let's not put anyone on him. And for 2 quarters, he ran around and did whatever he wanted. He had 10 intercept marks for the game. He positioned himself right in the perfect spot. If the ball was further than 55 from their own goal, he would go and sit the deepest defender. If the ball was in a position where a quick kick would come out, he'd be 30 metres from it. And they just let him do whatever he wanted until late when either a Rankin or a Shelley went to him. But by that stage, the game was gone. They were 20 points down. I felt that if you're going to play, and it's going to be interesting what Hawthorn do this week against Tom Stewart. Are you going to let someone go who's dangerous? Are you going to put a Jack Ginnivan or are you going to put a McGuinness on him to totally shut him down? Because what you can't do is let Tom Stewart stand by himself for 2.5 quarters in the middle of the game and let him control the game.
And probably, Gerard, what you can't do is what Hawthorn did against Lever and May. And that was, they were clearly worried about those two. So let's chip it around in our back half and deny them the ball. But that went to the extreme, didn't it?
That was a strategy that just went horribly wrong. And Sam Mitchell got the boys together and said, listen, I know what plan A was, but plan A you're taking absolutely to word perfect. We've got to still make some ground. Let's go forward. And they did that. I thought they changed it up really quickly. They're down on talent at the present time, and which is a concern because of some injuries, but also some list issues. But it was frustrating watching it. I mean, I was trying to look for the upside, Hodgie, but there wasn't any. I mean, it built Sicily's stats up. That was about the only plus.
Yes, I know. Without doubt, I think what Mitch found out on the weekend is sometimes with a young group who are trying to do the right thing, sometimes you're too coachable.
Yeah.
And I know that we went through that phase early on at the Lions. I know when I went to Brisbane, the young group were too coachable. The coach would give them instruction and they'll take it out to the nth degree. And I've got no doubt Mitch would have been saying, let's not go quick at them. Let's try and find the spare. But when you do that, it's all about taking ground as well, where Hawthorn would see a spare either beside or behind them and take that. And that's, look, as you said, they were able to change their tactics, but by that stage, the Melbourne were already miles in front. Their biggest issue wasn't so much the ball movement because they were able to change that. The biggest issues were what they were doing in and around the stoppage for me. Like, I think it was 9 clearances to 1 in the first quarter. I
think it was 11
inside
to 1.
11 to 1. Inside 50s wasn't that bad. It was like 14 to 6. But where Hawthorn, where they were so good last year, was that in and around the stoppage. The first 2 games, I think that's something that Mitch will be looking at moving forward because they've been shown up fairly easily in the first 2 games.
Yeah, and when you consider this issue of moving the ball slowly, keeping it off the opposition, and you compare that to, say, Sydney in particular and the Giants, they move the ball so fast, but they're also able to penetrate these defences and find holes. And you only had to go back 3 weeks or 2 weeks ago to see Sydney do the same against the very same opposition.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like Sydney, comparing Sydney to Hawthorn, Sydney's obviously got a list that are a lot more experienced and better players at this stage. I don't mind the fact that Mitch tried something. He's probably looking at that going, can we beat Melbourne face-to-face? Probably not. Let's try and take something away from them and clear that they went too far. I think Mitch is what he's shown since he's come on as coach is he's going to go flat out, full style, let's go forward. He tried something different.
Yep.
It didn't work, but at least he wasn't too egotistic to say, I'm going to keep doing this for the whole game. He changed the game style and the players moved the ball as they have in the past. But that's a learning. He knows what his players are capable of.
The response was actually fantastic, really. I mean, just couldn't get the score on the board.
Yeah.
Hodgie, there's been a bit made of Adelaide's midfield mix. How do you see it?
You sort of look through and at the end of the game, you can look at touches and all that, Kane, and everyone goes, oh, they've got heaps of stats and this and that, but it's what you do with the touches for me, and it's the balance that you have in and around the stoppage. If you look through Adelaide's midfielders, you've got the three Laird, Crouch and Dawson. Right, so for me, Dawson's your person you give the handball receive to, the person who runs, take ground and take meterage in the contest. Laird and Crouch are too similar for my liking. If you look through them, both of them got a lot of the ball. So Laird had 29, Crouch had 37, so they had 66 between them. But they only had 24 kicks out of that. And granted to them, in the second half, they kicked more. At half-time, they had 34 touches between them and only 8 kicks. So they were getting the ball, but they weren't doing much with it. And the bees in my bonnet a little bit is where you're giving handball receives to. If you're giving it, like Dawson had 16 handball receives. Love that. Give it to a bloke with a beautiful left peg who can drive the ball inside forward 50. He had 770 metres gained in that game. Crouch and Laird had 489 for the game in their 66 touches. And where I'm sort of going at, Crouch had 16 handball receives, Laird had 9. I'd prefer to see Malera get more. He only had 3. Hinge only had 6. Rankin had 3. Rochelle had 4. I'd prefer them getting the ball in and under and feeding it out. So where I want to see the change from Adelaide is have a Laird and a Crouch doing maybe a 50-50 in the middle and having those other 2 spots for a Dawson and maybe a flick through of a Malera, a Rankin or a Rochelle.
Let's see if they take that advice because it's sound advice. They've got a couple of interesting weeks coming up, the Crows. There was a long discussion clearly about whether they appoint him. We had a good chat about it on Friday night, Kane, and why the need. We spoke to Tim Silvers, but Fremantle at home and then Melbourne in Adelaide. It's a pretty serious couple of weeks coming up.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to be 0-4.
I think there's some nasty ones after that coming as well. Like not nasty, but challenging. So I mean, they could easily be sort
Carlton's the next one.
1 and 6. There's a showdown in there as well. So there's some tough ones, but you're right on that mix. And if you look at what Sydney, and you're right on the damage per possession. Like if you look at Sydney, you look through their numbers on the weekend. I think Gordon was like 24, but maximum damage per touch. Warner is the same. They're all goal kicking midfielders. Then you've got Rowbottom, who's your defensive one, who I think only had sort of 12 or 13 touches, but high tackle numbers always. They've got their mix right, and Melbourne's probably the same at the moment with what they're doing, and Adelaide's just isn't. And their drafting, I think, needs to be looked at because Berry is another one. Berry's a good, tough, honest midfielder, but he's a poor kick. Pedler, poor kick, but tough and honest.
Is this why they wanted to get Rankin in there as well? Just a bit of electricity, bit of speed.
They've needed him forward because you can't really rely on Fogarty and Walker only back for one game, and no Thilseeker, Thilthorpe and Murphy and Saliga on these types haven't hit the scoreboard. So
is that the reason that Crouch couldn't get into the side until round 20 last year because of that balance? And then when he came in, it's very hard to drop a bloke who has your 7 or 8 clearances and has your 30 touches every week. But with the mix, as we said, with Laird and Crouch, maybe give them 50% each because having those 2 blokes in there, yes, they're finding it, but then it's the next possession that's causing them trouble.
Are you frustrated with the amount of score reviews?
Oh, geez, I was on Friday night, and they took so long. There was one you could actually see from one of the camera angles. It was touch gone through for a point, and it took a minute. And then what the other beam of bonnet is when the umpire's unsure. I actually sound like you. I sound like you 2 old guys at the start of the show in the grumpy hour.
Yeah.
But what I sort of sit back is every goal gets looked at on the way back to the centre square for a bounce. If the umpire's unsure, and it goes on the inside of the post, the goal post, why doesn't he give it a goal, radio up to the blokes in the arc and say, hey, I think that may have hit the post, can you just double check? So then by the time the ball gets back up there, if it's a goal as he's clearly seen it or as he thinks he's seen it, no problems. We go ahead. If it's incorrect, they bring it back. At the moment, we're waiting for 50 seconds. And then we're sending it back in. So it's just a waste of time. I think there's better ways we can handle it.
They're gun shy, though, aren't they, Joe?
Oh, clearly they're gun shy. It's either they're gun shy, which we know is a tick, or cryptocurrency is it's the best sponsorship in the AFL right now.
You're one of those, eh? The conspiracy theorist. To slip a bit more brand power in.
Yeah, well.
But they're going better than the boundary umps, though, Hodgie.
But that's the thing is, we can't control that because there's no score review. So if it's out of bounds, umpire's made an error. That's no problems. Where we do have technology to do it is the goal. So if the umpire thinks it's a goal, tell him to give it a goal, and then on the way back to the centre, which every goal gets assessed whether it's right or not, hit the arc can channel it. I just think it's going to be a fast way rather than just sit there and wait for 20, 30, 40 seconds, and then the ball gets transitioned back to the middle.
In the Sydney to Hobart, there's some guy sits on the bow. And I know you're looking at me strangely. How am I going to draw a comparison with this? And he lines up on a practice run through the start line. He lines up the starting boat with a tree or a house or something on the other side of the harbour. And he has to get it absolutely spot on.
Is that right?
So they don't cross the line beforehand. And I always look at this thinking, well, it's a very similar situation to what a goal umpire has to do. He's just got to look down the line and say, has that ball crossed the line or has it not? And yet we're seeing, there would be a lot of 360 or 540 penalties the way the goal umpires are operating at the present time.
Yeah, and the problem is they're too scared to get it wrong because of what happened in Adelaide. The umpire gets dropped, and the big stakes on that game, and it was like when the cricket umpires at Square Leg were first able to go upstairs and check a run out. Yeah. They just did it every time, even though it was clearly out or in.
And there's a bit happening. They're going a bit quicker than Comanche,
some
to be
of
fair,
them,
Jared.
Some of them.
They get the ball's travelling. His arms and legs going everywhere.
But they're 4 metres away.
Yeah, I know. Appreciate that too.
We just need the ball.
There was 1/2 a metre in front of the post that was reviewed.
What is going on with the boundary umps? It's unbelievable. And in the same spot of the ground in the first few rounds as well.
There's a spirituality.
What's happening there? We've got 4 of them too. What do keep missing them?
Hodgie, what's happening with the Pies?
They've become the turnover kings. If you look at Collingwood, who I think at this stage last year we were saying how good Collingwood are at moving the ball. From the year before when they just missed out on a grand final, they were the team that took the game on through the corridor. They were hitting risky kicks. But the stats have come back. So last year, Kane, they gave up 71 points a game in total. And that is every way they gave up 71 points. This year, they're giving up 69 points in turnover. So you sit back and go, why are they zip 3? That's a pretty good indication why. Is when they've got the ball in hand, where it's the most damaging part of their game, or it was the most damaging part in the game, they're turning it over. And whether that's just either lazy with their skills, bad decision-making, or the fact that the opposition are realising they need to pressure those back-enders to turn it over even quicker. But that's a big reason why this team that we sat back over pre-season and said these are in for a grand final for sure. That's why they're sitting zip 3 and scratching their heads.
Kingy was pretty strong on them this morning with Gerard saying they can't win the premiership. Are you in that camp?
I've always believed, watching clubs that do win flags and knowing what you do as an individual, you have your best years when you've worked the hardest over summer. Now, the mail coming out of Collingwood is they've worked hard over summer, but they don't look hungry. And whether you can develop hunger over the season is very, very doubtful to me. They're going to come back. I don't think there's any way you can write them off for the 8. But when it gets to the pointiest end of the season, I reckon their sides at the present time showed they're much hungrier.
What's the secret to going back to back, Hodgie? Have you got the secret sauce? You have, I think.
It's the mindset definitely has a bit to do with it. I know, and we've spoken about it a lot over the last little bit with SEN, with Geelong missing last year's finals. But when we won it, we weren't as hungry in the off-season, and we just let the celebration, whenever you caught up with someone, you'd have a beer with them, and that just continued on until, yes, when we got back into training together, our mind was switched off, but that was 8 weeks, 10 weeks. As soon as, after 2013, one thing we made as a pack, that you celebrate for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks after that last game, because Kane, you'd probably know fitness-wise, I think your body starts to detrain after 17 or 19 days. Our commitment to each other, and we'd send a text message around to every player saying it's Crossroads Day. Are you going to continue going in the path that you are and drink too much and eat and be lazy and don't act like a professional? Or are you going to get to that crossroad and make a turn and think, no, we're starting to focus on next year, and last year won't be spoken about? So after every year, we never caught up for, do you know how you see a lot of these teams do premiership catch-ups and this and that? We're only starting to do it now 10 years later because we we're embarrassed post 08. So we never wanted to think about what we did in the past after 2 weeks after grand final, because last year was irrelevant. And people sort of say, you make good bonds. Yes, you did. But we never got caught up and never got ahead of ourselves like we did in 08, because we wouldn't allow ourselves.
I reckon there's a spring carnival factor. The amount of photos you see of players at the Spring Carnival always gives you an insight.
What about the Grand Prix? Does that count as well?
Well, that was very recent, wasn't it? Jeez, the world is definitely changing.
It's a good point. Hodgie, you've got a point on some young players.
I feel that it's hard. Like, we're looking at Collingwood obviously at the time, but we're sitting back and everyone's going, steel side bottoms looking slow and going to ground, and Scotty Pendlebury. If you look back last year, Scotty wasn't in their best 2 or 3 players for the whole year. Yes, on a big day, on grand final day, when he needed to, he stood up, and that's what a good leader does on grand final day. When things need to be controlled, he was the best leader out there, and he led from the front. Throughout the year, we weren't talking about Scotty. We weren't talking about Steel Sidebottom. We were talking about the Dacos. We were talking about the Goey. We were talking about Tommy Mitchell. We were talking about these guys, Crisp. I just feel it's hard that all of a sudden they get off to a bad start, and we focus on these guys who clearly they're past their best, but they haven't dropped off a hell of a lot from where they were. They weren't in the top 2 or 3 or 4 that we were talking about last year. I think it's the younger guys that need to stand up. Dacos, who come first and second in the BNF, they need to take that next step. Crisp hasn't had the best start. De Goey, everyone rates De Goey so highly because of his stoppage dominance and the power he can show from a stoppage. We haven't seen that at all. So I think the focus needs to be on these younger guys to say, hang on, let's look after the older boys and take the step. Don't wait for Scotty to do it.
Yeah, I think the collective has been the problem, because you chuck in more. We speak about Maynard, who's been okay, but not at his best. We speak about Quainer. The forward line hasn't been able to function. Schultz hasn't settled in yet. So when you put it all together, and Pendlebury's a high-profile name who, in opening round, has 2 touches in the first half. It's not what we are used to with him. And then you start to go, okay, well, him going to ground a lot, playing for free kicks, and these things are highlighted because the form and the players around him isn't there either. Tom Mitchell goes to ground a lot, and you think, gee, can Pendlebury and Mitchell play in the same position? So I think the questions are fair, but your point is that they don't have a lot of youngsters. That's the other thing.
Yeah, it's these guys that drove the lift from missing the 8, going from 17th to 3rd. It wasn't Scotty doing that.
Yeah.
It was these younger guys we just spoke about. So I understand what you have said about Scotty going to ground, and yes, his stats aren't comparing. His stats are comparing to his first couple of years in the AFL. But what I'm saying is for players to go on and play long periods at the time, they need those younger fellas for the drive coming through. And that's what Collingwood got 2 or 3 years ago. Are these guys going to bond together and take that next step or bring the next fellas through? I just felt it was more, we should be looking more at those guys than the older fellas in this situation.
Now, the unsociable Hawks, which you did very successfully, and the Essendon Edge, do these things work? It work for you? Will it work for the Bombers?
It worked for us because we had to change the mindset of how people looked at us. We were called Mummy's Boys. There was an article, I think Mike showed. Don't laugh at that, Kane. It was all the blokes like
yourself and Louis and these tough nuts.
Hey, no. It was the ones who had blonde tips in their hair.
Okay,
so,
the Trent Crowd. Crawford.
No, it was 2004 when it was the lighter frame fellas that we had that were all put in there, but it sort of gave it to everyone, sort of saying that, they're a bunch of Mummy's boys, they're about tips in their hair and pretty boys and this kind of stuff. And it was when Clarko came the next year, it was like, well, are you guys going to stand for that? And it wasn't about going out there and beating people up. It was about being hard when the ball's there, being physical, but it's also not taking any crap as well. And you look at what Essendon, and you heard Brad Scott talk about, it's the Essendon edge. I'm okay for him to do that, but you need to do it all the time. You can't just come up against Sydney because you guys have had a few run-ins. If it's going to be a part of your DNA, let it known to other teams that every time you come and play against them, we're going to be physical. We might not be as good as you, but we're going to put you to the sword as far as physicality. That mix with learning how to defend is the other thing that I'll be looking at them. Yes, bring that every week, but you've got to learn how to defend. If you're going to hit people late, the amount of times I saw Essendon blokes running back towards their goal because they didn't do their work early, they didn't anticipate, they didn't read the state of the game. That looked poor, and that's why they were so far behind on the score sheet. But I don't mind the Essendon edge, but they need to bring a few other things and bring it more consistently before they're going to be a decent team.
Gerard, did you get the feeling Sydney were sort of laughing at them after the game with Papley's comments, and Heaney was a bit more understated than what Papley was? It was like, okay, you gave it a good shot, but really you didn't really inflict any damage. That's how I read it.
I think you could interpret it that way, but I thought Essendon played really good footy for the first, I guess, hour of football. After that, the Swans sort of got themselves back, got themselves sorted out. I think came to grips with the fact that, okay, there's going to be a clip every time we go near the ball. The tackles are going to be a little bit more significant. Then they measured up and evened that up, and then they went to work and got their clearance work going better, and the transition was there for everybody to see. Whether they were, I think Papley might have been having a bit of a chuckle and saying, "Well, is that the best you got?"
Well, Heaney said we put it up on the whiteboard at quarter time. We said, "How long is this going to last?"
Yeah.
So I kind of think
that's
the school,
exactly what I mean, Kane. Because they don't have that history. They're a team that you look at the way they've played in the past. It's been a team that wants to score. Like since round one last year, there's been one. They've I think given up 100 points in. They've kicked 100 points and given up in losses since last year 6 times. No other team's done it more than twice. So yes, they want to play the high scoring, exciting brand, but they're giving up 120, 130, 140 points consistently. You've got to be able to defend, and if they're going to do that and be physical, that's what Papley was talking about, and that's what Heaney was talking about. If you're going to do it in the first quarter, do it for the whole game and let it become a part of your DNA.
I say good on them, though, because the last time they went up there, they were embarrassed. They've had players embarrassed on the field. They've had incidents with the opposite. I mean, it was an interesting decision to make it public, though, I thought, as well. I'm not sure how the unsociable Hawks... For the coach to get up during the week and put it on the public agenda like that, and I'm glad that he did, on my side of the fence, Hodgie, but as a player, I mean, what you run the risk, I guess, of egg being thrust back on your face. Could you have just done it internally? Have your Essendon edge internally and play with that?
No, but you'll get response. If everyone knows that you're going out there to be physical, guess what? Everyone's going to be watching. If they get 50,000 people at the next game, they're going to be seeing who's going soft. He's putting a commitment out there that every Essendon person that pulls on a jumper is going to commit to that jumper and be physical and show to their supporters that they actually care. Other parts will come, but as long as they get that week in, week out, it's a start. It's the same as last year when he put out round 17, we're fatigued. Yeah. I almost fell off my seat thinking the coach gave him an excuse. No, he did that. So at the end of the season, he could go and rip his players and say, you're not fit enough. Look at yourself. You're going to Ibiza last year. This year they go on a pre-season camp. Things are getting put in place for Essendon to get better. Just don't expect it to happen straight away. So I can understand why he put it out there. It's because he wants everyone to watch him and rate him just as they're doing internally.
And if you're an Essendon supporter, maybe you love it too. You're sitting there going, well, we've had it put over us for so long.
It's been 7,000 days. They need to change something.
Provided to Hodgie's point that it continues. And I mean, the Saints this week is a huge game. There's some big outs for the Saints. If King doesn't get off, there's some big outs for Essendon with Wright. He's not going to get off. So
I like the alliteration too. Essendon edge.
Yeah, it works. It's right up your. I'm surprised you didn't.
It's right out of the Weagles web playbook.
Disappointed.
Did Travis Cloak do the wrong thing as the runner, Hodgie?
Oh, look, I didn't mind it. I didn't mind a bloke going in there. He didn't touch any opposition players. Did not touch, and that's fine with that. He grabbed his own, which they're all fine with him. They know him. But I can understand why the AFL are putting a stop to it, because if a runner at local footy goes and does it, if someone else in the VFL and they turn around and they don't know the runner that well and they hit him or throw him to the ground, and then some runners don't have the composure of Clokey, where they might have went and pushed a Sydney player. So, look, I understand what he did. I actually thought, well done. He just wanted his players to get on with it, push and shove, move on. But I 100% understand where the AFL come where they come into it in their mindset.
Kane, you used to have a runner that was
David Armfield.
The
19th man. He would have been right up his alley.
He checked his champion data stats at the end of every game.
Absolutely loved it. And he was a good character to have around the club.